Okay, I'm gonna give it a couple of seconds to start getting everything together.
Sure.
But we should be live. So I'm gonna start us all off. Hi everyone, thank you for attending Kuumba Kickback. Welcome to the Redefining Historical Fiction and Romance Representation Ourselves panel. Despite the popularity of Bridgerton and other historical romance fiction on the page and on the screen, there is still a considerable gap of representation of Black fans and creatives in the conversation to move the genre forward. Even though many Black creatives have paved the way to represent themselves in these genres, there are still people who question the historical accuracy or realisticness of Black historical fiction and romance. Join the BGC community members and historical fiction author Kaia Alderson, for a discussion on finding community with fellow Black fans and sharing their favorite historical and romantic fiction as well as their own creative endeavors. And with that, I'll turn this panel over to the moderator.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda-Rae Prescott. I am a BDC member, the one who's always talking about period drama all the time and romance things all the time in our outside and public spaces. When I'm not on BDC things, I am a social media backend worker, and in public, I am a freelance journalist that reviews things like Bridgerton and Outlander. But so much of my work is focused on trying to bring more Black voices forward in the genre, both as creators and also as fans, because so much of what happens in this genre is all about what white people think and feel, and it's just too much of that. So this panel hopefully can address that issue. I'm going to introduce my fellow panelists from on my screen from clockwise. So next up would be to introduce themselves would be Stacie.
Hi guys, I'm Stacie. I am an avid reader, sometimes a blogger. Right now we're not doing the blogging thing as much, and I'm also a sometimes writer. That happens when the spirit takes me. You can actually find me on, I'll say Twitter because my Instagram is kind of just there, but I'm constantly on Twitter talking about all things books and all things sports. And I'm also a lover of all types of historical narratives. And yeah.
Maryum, you're next on my monitor.
Again, I'm also a big reader, mystery novels, period mystery novels, fantasy, period fantasy, all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to talk about period pieces.
All right. Kaia, you're next on my monitor.
Hi, I'm Kaia Alderson. I am the author of Sisters in Arms, and I'm a historical, I do have a historical romance novella, but I am a historical fiction author, and you'll see me on social media, Twitter, talking about historical stuff, highlighting Black doctors in history because people seem to think they don't exist, and regular snark, and then you can go to my IG for my stress baking during the pandemic.
Last and not least, Mel.
Hi, I'm Mel. I am a full-time librarian, part-time writer, podcaster, reader. That's it for me.
It is okay. The great thing about this panel is that because we have a mix of experiences, it's going to make the questions that much more interesting than the answers. Now, I want to ask everybody, what was their first encounter with historical fiction and their first encounter with romance? Because, of course, we all had to start somewhere. I'm wondering where everybody started. And you can jump in any order.
Are we specifically talking about Black romance, historical romance?
Yes, actually. Thank you for finding that. I missed that one word reading on Google Docs.
Okay, because I was about to say some disturbing stuff. My first introduction was Beverly Jenkins' Something Like Love in 2002.
Anyone else to their first introduction?
I honestly don't know if I can answer I feel like it was in adulthood. I feel like I stayed away or just wasn't exposed as much when I was younger. So it had to have been around college is when I really started diving into more Black historical fiction, more Black romance. And I don't even dabble as much into Black romance. I'm definitely more on the Black historical fiction. And if romance kind of weaves its way into there, then that's fine. I'm all here for it. But it had to have been definitely, I want to say 2006, 2007 is when I really started reading more Black historical fiction and really diving into that kind of genre and enjoying it because I think I could handle it once I got older. Well, when I was younger, I was like, okay, if I'm gonna read a book, I'm just gonna be happy. We're not gonna go there right now. So yeah, adulthood at some point.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll go. It's actually funny. I'm actually the opposite. As a child, I would read like the most traumatic stuff, and it'd be like totally fine. And as an adult, I literally can't read anything anymore unless it's like happy and unicorns and flowers. But as a kid, I Roll Up Thunder, Hear My Cry. It's like a children's book by Mildred G. Taylor, set in like the 60s, 50s, I want to say, in like Georgia. I think it was in Georgia. Don't quote me, but I really connected with that book as a child, and it was like about like a young Black girls coming of age and like the era of sharecropping. I guess it's kind of heavy for a child, but I really love those books, and they're like super special to me. I would love to meet Mildred D. Taylor. Anyways, yeah, I would say I also read The Bluest Eye really young as a child too. Like I personally consider that Black historical fiction. I probably read that like book. And so yeah, those were my first.
And it's funny because you mentioned Mildred D. Taylor. I didn't read any of her books until I was an adult, and I absolutely loved them. But I mean, like within the last couple of years is when I started reading those. And I would read one and then hand it to my kid, who was only like 11 or 12 at the time, and he enjoyed them. But I wanted to make sure I could have those conversations with him about some of the content of the story. Which, if I'd been younger, I don't know if I'd have had been able to have that conversation with any adult I had in my life. So it was, but I love those books. But as a child, I probably would have cringed, even though I could watch whatever I want. It's weird. But yeah.
It's okay.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Or just to backtrack, my first historical fiction that I read would have been The Color Purple when I was 10,
I was just about
right
to say.
after the movie came out.
Yep.
Yeah, I read The Color Purple in high school. That was my first book.
Mm-hmm.
I think my origin story was similar to Maryum's because I feel like I read a lot of those like YA middle grade Black authors as a kid because, of course, what do you do when you realize that Dear America has too many white people as main characters? Just so from there, Color Purple, all that became kind of just part of my journey, kind of alongside everything else I would read. I'd bounce back and forth between pure biography and fiction on a regular basis in terms of like just seeing something in documentary and being like, oh, I want to read more, or kind of going along with that. Now, when you hear the terms Black historical fiction and Black romance, what do you think of? Like, what do you expect when you see that label on someone's work?
It depends on if it comes off as literary or more commercial. Because the commercial, especially if it's written by Black women, we deal with the hard issues and the devastating circumstances, but we also show the joy and the triumph and the resistance. Where the more literary, sometimes you have to be mentally prepared because it's going to take you there. So I try to go for the balance.
I agree. I definitely agree because I don't want to go straight to the idea of trauma because who wants to dive into trauma like that? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it also goes back to what you said. A lot of times you end up jumping between historical fiction and nonfiction books because you start reading something and it spurs something, so you want to explore that further. But I like anticipating where that joy and that triumph is going to come from in a lot of the books that I read. So a lot of times I'll hop into something hoping for the best, might end up disappointed, or I might end up feeling like, oh, this was kind of incredible being on this journey with this women and seeing what they went through and where they ended up. But it is one of those things where you can read the back of a book and be like, not today. Let me just put that to the side and go to something else. So it definitely depends, but I definitely don't want to focus on the idea of preparing yourself for trauma. But with our history, it's kind of hard not to know that might be included in a story when you're grabbing it to read.
Since you mentioned trauma, unfortunately, I'm going to have to add a question here. How do you balance dealing with trauma when either you're researching something or you're starting to write your own work or you're going to pick up something from the library or, you know, pick something on Netflix? Like, how do you balance that our history can be traumatic, but also finding self-care when you are exposed to that trauma? Like, how do you balance that? What are your methods for handling it?
I know for one, I can't read heavy stuff right before bedtime, which is when I normally read everything, because I will have weird dreams or crazy dreams. So I have to do it more in the afternoon or in the morning. What else? I know when I was researching this book, this wasn't necessarily Black history, but the French history during World War II of the civilians on the ground. I attempted to read one of those books and only got about a page and a half in, and it was too much. So again, I need to go back to read that book, but it's just, I know I have to create that time and space where I can really deal with it and read it. One thing for me is what I'm reading and what I'm working on. There's always, as much as I want to go into the heavy, dark places, there's always something that shows light or hope. And I think I tweeted something about this earlier. It's like, it's one thing to tell us, you know, the truth of our history, but tell the whole history. Don't just say, you know, we passively accepted what happened to us. There was always resistance. There were always little baby wins, even in the face of some horrible things. So I think when we are dealing with it, you know, you have to look for those unspoken threads of happiness. Like if you're reading about runaway slaves and you read those ads and they talk, you know, from the owner's perspective, but that means somebody got away. Somebody, even if it was for a day, they had a day to breathe as a free person. So you just want to keep that in mind, and just, you kind of have to search for the history that isn't necessarily on the page.
For sure. Anyone else want to jump in?
I was going to say, honestly, I really stopped reading the most stuff like that. So that's also been me.
That's also a solution.
Yeah. So once I know it's really like it's happy and it's going to be, you know, like I said, sunshine and rainbows and flowers, I really just stopped reading.
I bookend my books with happier books before I read something. So if I know, I'm one of those people that I make lists. It's like I have a shelf of books that I know I want to get through. And if I know I'm going to pick up a historical fiction book that I know is going to be heavier, I intentionally try to read the quickest, sappiest, just happiest book possible beforehand. So I have something uplifting before I dive deep into this story, because I also can read a book and start having those really vivid dreams and really vivid like nightmares where you are so concerned. And that's a part of reading a really good book too. It happens when someone's able to draw you that deeply into the story. But I don't necessarily want to have a dream about being a runaway slave or have a dream about these traumatizing circumstances. That's not every historical fiction book, but it can happen, even in the small details when you're reading through the lines. Then after I finish, I'm either binge watching a show or watching a movie that I've watched 1,000 times before to give myself some kind of levity and room to breathe after having gone through this. And what sucks is that I'll read a book like that and be like, gosh, that was so traumatic. And I'm like, I need to recommend this to everyone that I know because it was still incredible and they're going to love it and be traumatized too. But you can't hide from it. And some people do a really, really great job of telling the story. And for me, I want to be able to read those stories. So I've created coping methods, and a lot of it has to do with indulging in other things completely outside of that topic in order to both enjoy it, relate to it, and then be able to step back once it's done and go, okay, we're not in that situation anymore. And that sparks its own kind of joy.
Yeah, I also have like vivid nightmares if I read something a little too tragic. So like I try to like read something and then before I go to bed, like I'm just gonna turn to this really fluffy fanfic. I'm gonna think for an hour and then I'm gonna go to sleep.
Yeah, fanfic is a great way to navigate issues. Actually, speaking of fanfic, has anybody wrote any fanfic along these lines? Oh, okay. Never mind. I had a wish. I was like, never know. You might have a fanfic writer. in the audience. Who knows? Anyway, those are all really good tips. I do the same thing. Like if I'm reading something heavy, especially if it's something I have to like work on to like submit for freelancing, I'm like gonna balance that out with something ridiculous like before I go to bed, so I don't like have nightmares. Or read 2 books at the same time, like get something fluffy, and then go back and forth between the serious book and the not so serious book too, depending on what the situation is. Now, since we talk a lot about books, I figure let's have everybody filling up their shelves with recommendations. Like, what are your favorite Black historical fiction and Black romance novels? Obviously, Kaia is number one rec here, but anything else y'all want to add to the shelves?
Well, I'm going to highly recommend Mildred G. Taylor. Like now that we mentioned it earlier, and I honestly read Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, and just started buying the other ones. So it's like, well, I'm going to make it through them all eventually because they are absolutely incredible. I also really love The Good Lord Bird. Like I felt like that was one of those books, even though it centers around like the John Brown character, you see so many other Black characters take center stage in that book, and I know that one's been adapted, and I have not had the wherewithal to make it through the entire series yet. But The Good Lord Bird was amazing. The Underground Railroad was amazing, by Colson Whitehead, I believe. Did I write that down? I did. And I actually really enjoyed Homecoming by Yaa Gyasi. Like I thought that book was really, really well done, and those are definitely some that I would highly recommend adding to the shelf.
Anyone? Mel, you got Rex before
I would recommend anything by Alyssa Cole.
You stole my answer, ticket.
She's a good one.
Yeah, I read the novella Agnes Moore's Wild Night first, and I was like, wait a minute. Is this a Black woman medieval period?
What?
I was like, huh, I did not expect this. And like the rest of her books are just amazing.
Yeah, for me, I started the Loyal League because, of course, what happens on Twitter is when I mention something like, someone's like, well, there's this book that like kind of does that for you, because like I usually complain about like Black representation like a lot, so they're like, oh yeah, here's this, and I was like, oops, I'm now sucked into a black hole. And then the other for me, Beverly Jenkins has been like amazing to like discover. I wish I read her books when I was younger because I felt like they're such serious. Like I'm like I would have been a lot happier when I was younger if I found some of those. When I say younger, I mean like in my 20s versus now, like my earlier 20s and teen years. Because I read far too many like serious biographies about Black history when I was like in high school, so maybe I had some fun stuff to like balance that out. Also another rec of mine, because a lot of us also read a lot of things that are outside of America. Island Queen by Vanessa Wiley, which is sort of like kind of the anti Bridgerton, kind of real Caribbean history angle on that era as well. Like was absolutely fantastic. I'm so glad I got to review it for Dead of Geek. Another one, So Many Beginnings by Bethany C. Morrow, which is a great like remix on Little Women.
Reading that now.
Yes, it was so good. I was like, I heard that this arc was a thing. I was like, I need it. Like, I need it. There's so many, because like that's one of those quintessential coming of age things. It's like we don't have like, they've never told a perspective. They've never told the Black woman perspective on that whole era at all. I'm like, we need this, even if it does annoy the Alcott stands, because they kind of need to be annoyed because they've had to run the mill for 150 years. Like, we need a shot. We definitely need a shot in that. And actually, speaking of lack of representation, what do you believe we need to see more of in terms of representation of Black romance and Black historical fiction on screen and on the page? I know it's a really loaded question.
We need to see more or even more of Black women fighting back in all these circumstances that you see. I read a passing where I think it was on Twitter, I don't remember who mentioned it, where the black female slave poisoned her master, the wife and the husband, and then later I think she might have shot the son. I'm like, ooh, I want that. I want to know more about the American Maroons. We did have Maroons communities in the United States. People don't believe anybody that tells you there weren't. They're mostly in South Carolina and Virginia. I want to see that on the screen. What else? I didn't get a chance to do my book recommendations, but Marise Konde, she remixed Wuthering Heights into Windward Heights. I didn't like Wuthering Heights. I didn't get it, but I love Windward Heights. She also did I Tituba, Black Slave of Salem. So if you want to see Salem from the Black slaves perspective, there you go. Also, I read an advanced copy of Carolina Built by Kiana Alexander that I enjoyed, and I'm getting ready to, that comes out in February, and I'm about to dive into By Design by Piper Hughley, which is about Anne Lowe, who was the designer of Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress, and that comes out in June.
Oh, I forgot about Piper. I'm glad you mentioned Piper.
Among her other books.
Because she's got a lot. Maryum, I just answered asked a question about what do you want to see more of in the genre that we're lacking right now in terms of either Black romance or Black historical fiction on screen and on the page, like what there needs to be more of. I know it's a very loaded question. Also, book recs if you got any as well.
No book recs. I haven't. All the books that have come out lately, I haven't really been enjoying them. But what I want to see more personally is probably like, this is a totally personal preference. It's like probably like more Black historical queer romance or Black historical, like, you know, like just things like that. Like, I think it'd just be so cute to like read like a Zora Neale Hurston, like James Baldwin, like that time period, like a cute like group ensemble book where like everyone's vibing and having a great time and just living their best queer lives. Because you know they had that. It would be cool to read a fictionalized version of like the Fire magazine and how that was created, and like maybe have like a page from the issue at the end or something. I'm not gonna personally doing this work, but I think
yeah. Well, I figure it this way. We put it out there, and then somebody watches this panel, and somebody's thinking about it in their head, and then boom, instant audience. And also, I know sometimes these industry people creep on my Twitter page, so
tweet it.
Yes, I'll just tweet this whole link panel. It's like, hey, here's some free ideas. Free ideas. Like free ideas for everything. I mean, for me, I feel like answering this question is kind of difficult because I feel like there's so much we're missing. One of my number one requests is I think we just need to, because people prefer to do a lot of adaptations, we need to see more Black women authors getting adaptations. Like that's kind of the big thing. And especially for the Anglophiles in the audience, we need to see more Black British women getting book adaptations, because it's kind of ridiculous how like some of the best representation in the genre has to come from America, because people aren't getting any. I mean, there are authors that are like getting totally ignored because the best rep is from America, which is kind of crazy. And just that's kind of one of my big things. Just need to see more, because they're like, I believe Beverly Jenkins might have a deal with somebody. Like, I'm not trying to create a rumor, but I think I saw something. One of her things was like bought, but I don't know where that's headed. I'm like, listen, and Kaia's book as well. I'm like, there's so many World War II things going on. Like, why hasn't anybody approached Kaia for her book? Because I'm like, it's fantastic. It's like,
put that energy in the universe, please.
Yes,
we're trying.
It's like 1940s hidden figures. Like, pretty much, it's right there for the taking. I mean,
I also want to see more stuff coming from the continent, and forgive my ignorance. It may be out there, and we're just not finding out about it here in the States. Because I try to be proactive, and I follow BBC Africa and other African news outlets on Twitter. But if it ain't on there, I ain't seeing it.
There is a African book. I can go look for on my shelf. I have it, and it's like it's set in in West Africa during like early colonization. So it's kind of like an interesting like time period, because you see people who are like doing like, you see the people who are like African who are like in prison, like, or who are like slavers who are like helping ship like other people out. But it's not really written like this, like cut and dry when you read about it historically. It's very much like.
Yeah, I think I remember we read Double Yoke by Bucci and Machetta, but that was in college, so that was over 20 years ago. So I need to go back and reread that.
This was like 5 years old. I'll go grab it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
No problem. All right. Well, I prep my next question. All right. Okay. Now, we all interact in various ways of fandom. And of course, fandoms in this topic are still predominantly dominated by white folks, unfortunately. Has anybody received a negative experience in those spaces for either standing up for Black history or Black romance, or calling out issues about representation on screen that either was terrible, incomplete, or just not what you expected? I know it's another loaded question, but I have to go there at some point.
So you need Piper for that one.
True, but
that question. I haven't. I was expecting it because, I came up watching Piper. So writing my book, I actually have a whole timeline of what happened historically and my sources down to the page number of where I got it. And then I put on that same timeline my story. And, so if anyone ever challenged anything I did, I can say here. Only thing I've seen is like in reviews, I know one person said that my book ended too happy and too good to be true. But if they want the historical I won't say what that is, but if you want the historical reference in the newspaper from 1945 and 46, I'd be glad to send it to them. So that's about it. And then when I wrote my historical romance novella, and everybody assumed my doctor hero was a white man, and he wasn't. And I was just like, why would you, 1912. So that's why, if you follow me on Twitter, every Black doctor I encounter in the past gets a shout out.
Yeah, I find that wild that like people come after creators who've done research into whatever they're talking about. And I'm like, how do you think you know more than they did because they did homework? Like, it's a very odd experience in fandom. Everybody else has not so great experiences with talking about these issues in fandom.
I purposely avoid these conversations with people on Twitter. Like I'm one of those people that I'm very, very good at seeing something and continuing to scroll. Because what's ended up happening is that all this time, basically the Witters have been able to write history. So regardless of how false that history may be, people are comfortable when they see themselves, especially when they see themselves in a good light, that this is the way that it's supposed to be. So it could be something as simple as, and I hate to quote this specific show because wasn't great, but the representation was there. But when you watch something like The Spanish Princess, where you actually see Black tutors in that time frame, you actually are seeing that kind of representation, and people are making negative comments about it. It doesn't make sense for me to argue about it. We've existed forever. We've been there. That these people were part of the story. This might not have been their exact role. This might not be that exact, named character, but this is a representation that's there because these people did exist in this time frame. So when I come across things like that, so they're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna keep scrolling to keep avoiding it because there's no reason to dive into the ignorance, especially not where I am in my position. Their opinion holds no weight for me. If I enjoyed it and I enjoyed the content, but I'm gonna keep enjoying it and enjoying the content, and I'm not gonna try and argue with someone about whether or not they cared enough about it, when more than likely if you didn't like it, then you weren't the audience that was meant to enjoy it. I was, and I did. So in that sense, I just I'm very good at realizing that on this computer screen or on my phone screen, you can type as much as you want to. I genuinely will not care once I log out, basically. And that avoids all the trolls and all that other nonsense that I also don't care to engage with.
Yeah, I don't like conflict, and I see a lot of people who comment like that are looking for a fight, and that's not a fight I want to give them. I don't want to get into it. You don't think Black people existed outside of slavery in the 60s? I can't change your mind.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to try.
That's kind of my struggle right now because I'm a writer and because I kind of explore that conflict. I also don't want these people in my immediate mention. So I've been doing a better job of like this is a problem, but I'm not going to talk to you people who are already ignorant. I'm just going to point out, like, what actually happened, you know? Oh, we have an interesting audience question. I'm going to slot out Nick. Nick has asked us now, because they are brilliant, what existing works of historical fiction would you love to see race-bent or reimagined from the lens of people of color? Ooh, I love this question.
We're getting Little Women, obviously, with so many beginnings. So that's something that I was really excited to see come to fruition. For me, I'm trying to think of an exact instance of something that I would want to see race-bent. I need time with that one. As I look at my books, I need time with that one.
I have one.
Okay.
Anne of Green Gables. Because I think that's primed for a race bet adaptation.
That's a good one.
I like that.
I like that. Because it's essentially one, because we already had almost their representation in the Netflix version.
Mm-hmm.
Which, let's be real here, why did people not like it? They saw a Trinidadian Canadian guy. Let's be real.
I got mine.
The naked models is nonsense. That's not about it. They saw him and they saw his, like, you know, family, and that was a problem. Let's be real.
I want to say, this is going to sound very random, so my apologies in advance, but I want to see the Three Musketeers.
Oh,
yes. And I say that because I will tell everyone till the day I die, Alexander Dumas was black, and I want to see a black-ass version of the Three Musketeers. And I just think it would be not only entertaining, but it would just bring more context to the story. Like his background and his father's background is kind of incredible. And I feel like a lot of that, especially with like Count of Monte Cristo, which also could be race-bent and something absolutely amazing. But those two stories, I think under that different lens would add so much more context. So those would be the main two that pop into my mind automatically, is the Three Musketeers and the Count of Monte Cristo.
When I found out that Alexander Dumas was black, I felt so betrayed. The level of betrayal I felt was like probably the second most betrayed I've ever felt before.
I will tell you,
this was kept from me all my life.
And I will highly recommend The Black Count, which is the story of his dad. It is incredible. And I read that before I read The Count of Monte Cristo, because it's supposed to kind of dive into part of his story, and that just reading those two in order, I was like, this is incredible. Alexander Dumas was black. I should have known, and I didn't know, and now I know, and I can never unknow it. And now I want everybody to know, because The Count of Monte Cristo is an amazing book, absolutely amazing. And Alexander Dumas is black, and can't nobody take that away from me ever. So it is what it is.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because apparently there was supposed to be a reboot version, but it disappeared into like COVID/production jail. So hopefully when it comes back, it'll come back as black as heck. It'd be great. Anyone else before I jump into my answer on that question?
I am ready to do an Indiana Jones reboot. If anybody wants, I have ideas. Holla at me, and that's all else I'm gonna say.
That would be great if it was gender bent too, with the women playing. Oh. I'll quiet down on that one.
Mm-hmm. No, because unlike Indiana Jones, black women explorers were real in the 30s. Sorry. Okay. Shh.
Oh.
Okay.
She went there. Sorry.
Nobody heard any of that, but yeah.
Nothing. Delete that.
Mm-hmm.
My answer to this question, actually kind of piggybacking on Alexander Dumas. When I was watching The Great, even though there's not a lot of representation there. There's not a lot of black representation in that show, actually. There are some people of color in there. Alexander Pushkin has black ancestry, and people kind of don't know about it at all. I was like, that is definitely something we need to see happen. Mm-hmm. That's another one. Like, yeah, that's definitely another person. Like, y'all should go to places with that. Like, just shake the table. Oh, my honest question. Next. What era of the past do you feel is underrepresented in historical fiction that you'd like to see?
All of them.
Yeah, but like you kind of have to narrow
Oh,
it down
I know.
all of them. Like just shout out one person or one era at least, or
I want to talk about in that period between the Revolutionary War and the Civil War in Charleston, where there weren't enough white women. And again, I read this in a footnote. So they were marrying their black women, and they were these black women were acting as wives and mistresses of the house and things like that. So I want to know more about that. It's not just Scarlett O'Hara.
Going into that too, I want to read more about the Reconstruction Era. I feel like we jump very, very quickly from the end of Civil War, and they make it seem like everything just stopped in 1865, and then there's almost 100 years of history that's kind of jumbled up before we get to the Civil Rights Movement. And so much happened, and there was so much success within that time frame. And I feel like that lack of acknowledgement is why a lot of people unfortunately didn't know about Tulsa until Watchmen and Lovecraft Country, because they've left out this major portion of history because it's not fitting that narrative. Like there were so many gains, and then all of a sudden there weren't. So that's one area that I would love to see explored more, as far from our point of view, more so than anything.
There's enough going on in early 1900s Washington, D.C. for a Black Downton Abbey type thing.
Yes.
I'd
like to see that too.
You heard that, HBO. I mean, you gave Julian Fellows
I have
money.
ideas.
Y'all gave Julian Fellows money for that, but I'm sure you have money for Black Downton Abbey.
Like, I want to see the creation of our HBCUs. That's something I'd like to see. I'd like to see that kind of joy where,
So I think this is most of the HBCUs, only one was started by a Black person. So I actually don't think it would be that interesting to look at the formation of the HBCUs. They're so grounded in the only one started by a Black person was
Morris Brown.
Yeah, which is basically defunct right now. But they're all started by missionaries or land grant colleges. But I think it'd be fun to see period pieces of people going, the actual students going through.
Yes, that. Yeah, I can see that.
Well, I'll probably get in trouble as a Spelman alumni, but the two white women who founded Spelman College were in a relationship. No one talks about it.
No, people talk about it. I mean,
yes, they do, but Spelman doesn't talk about it.
Oh, we talk about it at Spelman. I went there. We'd always
Me too. Hey, sis.
Yeah, we'll definitely be talking about.
They're buried next to each other, and that might be interesting. In 1881, Atlanta, two queer white women starting a Black school for women. Yeah,
that's a lot.
There's a lot going on there.
There is a lot. My wish list is very specific. A Phyllis Wheatley, either biopic or dramatization, because I feel like so much. We had Hamilton, but nobody saw about any of the Black figures in that era, especially Black women in that era. Okay, there's a blueprint here. Let's take that further. Even though she's a little bit earlier than Hamilton, but let's take that further. And also,
that'd be a good musical.
Hey. Another free idea. Another not so free idea, because I've been reading the book about it. Black Spartacus, which is the Toussaint Louverture biography. Somebody brought the rights to the book, but they kind of need money for it. So I'm I definitely want to see a Haitian Revolution thing, because
from a Black perspective.
From a Black perspective, that's the key thing. You can't just have we just can't have the straight on version of it from white historians. We cannot have it that way. We need to see the women involved with him. We need to see his family. We need to see everything from that perspective. I feel like so much of American history is tied into Caribbean history and is ignored. Nobody cares about it. It's just, Jamaica and Haiti and all these other islands are just let's go there on vacation. They don't even care about any of that interaction between the movements of freedom there and the movements here in America. There's so much interplay that just gets ignored. Also related to that, if you want a little less, Hamilton era aesthetics, Marcus Garvey would be a good person to do that.
And the Amy Garveys.
Yeah, like and also it's 1920s, so like you get like
Harlem.
You actually the Harlem Renaissance. Like, where is the prestige drama for that? Like,
They were so messy.
they were so messy. I mean, Self-Made kind of started there, but then like Self-Made also had so much pre-Renaissance history too. And I'm like, there is so much there. Like those rent parties, all the different figures. Also, it's a great chance for queer Black history too. It's like there's so much there. So much there it is. On Explore. And I have another audience question. Nick, no, sure, maybe I'll go first before I do.
Okay. I just wanted to say like the rise of queer ball culture in like the late 1900s or the late 1800s. I would love to see something on that.
Yeah. Like Pose is. I mean, there's people way more Pose doing all that stuff. So
I just saw something on Twitter about that. The first documented person to be prosecuted for drag, if you will, was a person of color or a Black person. So I'm here for it. I also want to see the Moors in Spain. Yes. I want to see Abu Bakari II and his brother Mansa Musa. If we're going to talk about ancient history. If you don't know, Abu Bakari II was the leader of Mali. He gave up his throne and went sailing across the ocean and made it to Mexico. He came back, told everybody, hey, I found some cool people over here. He went back and never returned. I want to see him.
For sure. All right, audience question time. Nick asked, what's the cutoff between historical fiction and contemporary?
It depends.
Yeah, it definitely depends.
It depends. Yeah. Technically, 9/11 is a historical event. But in terms of books and fiction, it's usually 50 years. So that's why we're only just starting to get the 1950s. People publishing is slowly embracing the 1950s as a historical period.
But that was 70 years ago. Oh, okay. You said 50 years.
That's why I say it depends. There's some books coming out. Like, I know people are like, I want to do the Black Panthers or the Civil Rights Movement in the 60s, but they're like, it's too soon. So, Cabbage Patch Kids are historical, and that's in my lifetime. So.
I feel like that is a tricky question because there's things that I pick up now and I'm like, okay, this took place before me. Do we consider this a historical fiction, or would we consider? I just read it, and if it's news to me and it feels old to me, then I consider it a historical fiction. That could be that list of things that can fall within that time frame, especially as I get older, is long. Because I mean, at this point, would we consider something like the 92 riots the historical fiction? If someone were to write a story, there was a story released not too long ago with Black protagonist, and it did a YA protagonist that I can't think of the name of it at the 90s kids, the Black, I can't remember. Regardless, would that be considered historical fiction? Like it's a hard line. I just read, and if I like it and it feels old, then I consider it historical fiction. Not even old, because that means I'm old. The Black kids. Thank you, Portia. Like I don't want to say if it's old because I don't consider myself to be ancient yet, but. Some of those things are historical events to other people. That's a historical event to my kid. He looks at it at 13 and sees that as a historical event. Same with like a lot of the trials that have taken place since then. So it depends on the age of the reader and how that event plays into the context of their lives, I think is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, I would say if you're trying to submit something to traditional New York publishing, 1950s and before, if you're not, I say it's wide open.
I tend to answer this question more on like a hard line, and I know some people will not like this when I say it. I say 1970 for journalistic reasons, because after 1970, the documentation relies a lot more on journalism versus versus academic scholarship, because I feel like certain eras, even past the 70s, have not clear. They've been researched, but it's not it's constantly changing. It's more shifting, and also to issues of technology, and also you're kind of more, when you cross 1970, you're crossing into people's lifetimes more definitively. before that, people now may not remember everything in full. It might have been their childhoods or whatever. But like once across 1970, you're getting way more into like the collective living memory. And that's to me where the line is drawn. But I also draw that line more so as a journalist because of how like we do research versus other fields. It also it definitely depends on who you're talking to. I mean, because kids would be like, 2000, that's a period drama. I'm like, I'm triggered. You made me feel old now. Like, it's really it is a tricky question to like answer. I have a question. Sorry, I'm like scrolling through because we actually ended up accidentally answering a lot of my questions. Now, do we have recs since he's talked a lot about books, do we have any recs for Black historical fiction or Black romance on screen?
What we want to see on screen?
No, like
it's already on screen.
Things already on screen that we want people to watch.
Belle?
Yes, that's the main one that popped into my mind was Belle too. I thought that was beautiful.
If Beale Street Could Talk was good. If you haven't watched The Color Purple, that what else?
I hate to say Underground because I know it's a slave narrative and we're tired of slave narratives, but that was an amazing
But that one,
show.
yes.
I was heartbroken when that didn't get renewed, especially after that season 2 finale. I thought that was amazingly well done, and we were centered. And I know that it definitely showed more of our inner struggles because you saw so much of the hierarchy within the system talked about within us, but not necessarily talked about outside of us. So seeing that on screen and seeing how those dynamics played out, I thought that was really, really well done. And Journey Smollett was amazing. So
I still want Misha to do a comic to finish up the storylines. Even if it's that, I'll take it.
Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah, that would be great.
That reboot of Roots a couple of years ago, that was good because there was more Black input into it versus the original.
I love the comment from Judd V. Janice paid for their crimes for canceling that show. I agree, and you know what? For people who don't know, it was canceled because the network got taken over by like Republicans, so they canceled. That was the first thing gone because they, it was sort of like, we hate Black people. That's it. It's gone, and then like they canceled all the scripted television on that. So yeah, it's messy. There was rumors a while back that Oprah might be circling around it again, but that might be rumor mill. Also, that was pre-COVID, so who knows at this point? But fingers crossed. Maybe
that one's perfect. It's outside. That's COVID safe, right?
Yeah, but then also too, period drama during COVID's and weird because a lot of the stuff that people do in period dramas is expensive, and I'm like 6 feet apart. That whole thing is just
I know.
Yeah, it's messy. It is very messy.
I want to circle back if I can real quick because you asked the question earlier, and I've been ruminating on it the entire time. It was what we want to see from historical fiction more. And honestly, it's more alternative universe historical fiction with Black leads. And what makes me draw to that was Watchmen. And I know that's random, but like I said, Watchmen is one of the reasons why a lot of people found out about Tulsa. And that kind of reimagining of what happened after Tulsa. It's possible we can do these types of historical fiction narratives. And I'd like to see that on screen, more alternate universe historical fiction narratives where maybe that attack was attempted, but it didn't succeed. And what happened from that? If we're going to go off for some of these historical events, what happened after that event? Or even just a historical fiction alternate universe where we're not in the situation that we're in now. And this is how we took this alternate route. But that's something that I would love to see more on the screen.
But with Black people calling the shots, because then we'll get Confederate all day.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah. No, not
with
not
Black people
Confederate.
running the narrative, please.
That one.
What else?
Oh my God.
Yeah, that almost broke me when that started.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm probably the only person in like the BC circle. I had not seen Game of Thrones, but when I saw that those guys was going to try that, I'm like, really? Y'all really like y'all pissed off like 20 million people, and now you're gonna let them write another show? What? Especially not our history, really?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, you know, certain people get to fail upward and others don't.
Yeah.
true. Very true.
No,
Piggybacking on what
I
you
agree. Alternate history would be really fun to see.
That would be dope.
Yeah. And not even alternate history in
Oh, no,
terms
go
of like
ahead.
serious things, but like just alternate history in terms of like, hey, this era written by Black folks, we're not slaves in this era. We're not colonized in this era. We're just out here having balls and stuff, you know, like,
Mm-hmm.
I know Bridgerton kind of tried, but at the end of the day, the book
So
was written by a white woman, and they have to still focus white characters, so it's like, yeah, it's kind of incomplete in that sense. I also was going to say something about, but yeah.
so basically we want Black Panther without all the magic.
Yeah.
Yes.
I take
So
that
keep
too in
imagining-
a heartbeat.
I would take it with the magic.
Yeah, I was gonna say I love magic. Bring more magic.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. I want a Mommy Wada. I want Mommy Wada on screen.
Oh, we have a question from an internal question. What are some Black cultural things you'd like to see the story behind represented in romance or historical fiction? Music, food, famous feuds, etc.
Hoodoo, I want to see the Mulebone scandal on screen with Langston Hughes, Louise Thompson, and Zora Neale Hurston. Oh, God, what else? I want to see the scandal at the turn of the century with Mary Church Terrell, what's her name, Josephine Bruce, and everybody with the Black Women's Club movement and the power struggles within that. What else? Yeah, or even just the formation of the sororities and what that beef was like. If we could get that on screen, that would be dope.
Ooh, the sororities, I'm especially intrigued by because it could be like, you know, Gossip Girl, but like way more intense.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm going to be real simple and say music and food. Like, I want to look at some of those because I feel like we keep saying, you know, Black people created all these different genres. Well, then let's dive in. Let's do that as a party. Let's show these creators and really lambast them that. And when it comes to food, I just like to eat. So let's dive. And I know we're seeing a lot of that on Netflix now, though, with people really diving into that part of culture. And yeah, that's exciting. But yeah, I'd love to see more of us with music centered on just us with music and not any of the things that happened outside of that, but just us creating and the sounds that came out of us just creating.
If anybody out there has the power to green like that, I'd like to be in that writer's room, please, for the music. Black music history. Thank you.
I mean, speaking of that, like I would love to see something on Sister Rosetta Tharpe.
Yes.
I mean, I have been hearing all my life that if you like rock music, that's a white thing. I'm like, no. If you look at the history, we started
it's all right there. Yep. I want Lil Hardin Armstrong. I want Hazel Scott. I want the all-girl bands and orchestras during World War II. I know I'm missing something. The early roots of gospel. I'm here for all of it. Florence Mills would be a good limited series. Jazz in Paris, the band from the Harlem Hellfighters in World War I and their influence on jazz in Europe, as well as the emergence of Latin jazz in New York.
She's got ideas. She ready.
Like I said, right in that writer's room. That's my geek.
Yeah. Did anyone watch it? There was like a historical drama about like a Black band that goes to London. It was on Netflix.
Where? Oh, I
Wait,
need that.
I can try to Google it. I didn't finish it because I got a little stressed and I worried something bad was gonna happen to them. But it was like started from the bottom, and it was about this Black band. They were like American. It's like set in the 20s or 30s, and they go to London, and they're like meet the Queen, and they're playing for like all these white people.
How do I not know about this?
Dancing on the Edge.
Yeah, Dancing on the Edge. That's what it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
All right,
that
I'm
one I've
watching
seen.
that. I need to see
Okay,
that. That is me.
So Dancing on the Edge, I should tell y'all, it is a PBS production, so you might find it on Amazon Prime. It might be behind a paywall, but you never know. I might be able to find a thing about, a thing. Low key, in case people are listening, I might be able to find a thing, Yeah, it was annoying you described it. It was like kind of described it backwards. So I kind of remember like the mystery part of that plot and not the black folks in London bar. I was like, oh wait, yeah, that I saw that. Like they nailed me a DVD screener.
Would you recommend it? I didn't actually finish
I recommend it.
Mhm.
I recommend it. Although you have to go in with the caveat that again, the writer was not black. It was
Okay.
Stephen Polikoff. So yeah, there's a lot of drama, there's a lot of white characters. There's some familiar faces in that plot, in that cast. If you're like an Anglophile, like I think Jenna Coleman's in it, and there's a bunch of there's like 5,000 other people in. There's like 5,000 other people in there. I might be wrong about. I did not look at IMDb, so I might be wrong about like IDing people. But yeah, because it's quiet. It is like several couple years ago. So
real quick, I would like to see a story about the Green Book that's actually about the Green Book.
Yes, and hoodoo and voodoo and everything magic.
Much. I would really like to see a book, a movie about the Green Book that's actually about the Green Book and not whatever that was. I don't know because I didn't watch it. You wasn't getting my coins, but that would be amazing.
I would like to see.
I want hoodoo. Sorry.
All right, let's hit Mel her last point because then I'm gonna have to wrap up.
Okay. Black women fighting for suffrage. Because they were fighting against white women and white men. And I want to see that conflict this has to be written by Black women though.
Yeah, because there's too much ideas. So much of that.
No white saviors. None of that. No.
Mm-mm. All right. Unfortunately, I have to wrap this up. I'm getting into like tap from. I don't want to run into the next panel. Where can folks find us after this panel ends to share more recs or just talk romance and historical fiction all day long? I'm gonna go clockwise again. Actually, I'm gonna go anti-clockwise on my screen. So Mel will go first.
Okay, you can find me at Jane_Anon on Twitter and Instagram.
Kaia is next on my.
You can find me at Kaia Writes on Twitter and Instagram.
Maryum?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Lena_Aisha.
And you can find me on Twitter at Stacie_W_books.
Cool. You can find me on Twitter at Amanda_R Prescott. Couldn't fit my whole name in there. And Amanda@Prescott.com for all my writing stuff. If there aren't any, wait, am I? Oh wait, I'm a little early. Oops. Okay, I'm glad we got that. Does anyone have any final thoughts before we have to say goodbye to everybody? Anything that
if anyone collected all of the books and movies that we mentioned here, if they could like tweet that at one of us, that would be super great. Yeah.
Be short memories. Mm-hmm. Any final thoughts?
Alexander Dumas was black.
Afro-Latinas exist, and I would like to see more of them in works, please.
Agreed.
For me, it's mostly we need to see more Black creators creating these things on page, on screen. Because the thing is, you already heard the demands of diversity in these genres. Like, why isn't that? Y'all are talking, but there's a lot of people waiting for action, and that needs to, and it's on both sides of the Atlantic. Although I'm especially going to stare a little bit harder at the Brits because they're about 40 years behind. Staring just a little bit harder, y'all, just because y'all are so far behind. You don't even have Oprah or BET or anything like that. So yeah,
not BET.
I'm just saying, because all the network decision stuff has to go filter through white people to BBC and ITV, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's why I have to say that. Like, I'm not saying BT's perfect, but like they have nothing. They're starting from scratch on that. So yeah.
Also, if anybody has the burning desire to write the thing and you're convinced that no one ever wants to read it or it'll never happen, this is my no one will ever want to read or buy this book thing. So do it.
Create the thing. I hope people get that out of this weekend. That's kind of what we've been saying.
Do it.
Create the thing. Do the thing.
Do
Even
it.
if it's epic, do it. Like, we will read it. We will support you with all that.
Do it and let us know.
Yes, just do the thing, y'all.
Oh, did I just call someone out? Oops, sorry. Not sorry.
No. No, I think Stacey's holding on to something. So yeah.
Oh,
Actually,
No, I'm good.
You go. I think we're actually at time. So
Yes.
this time, yay! All right. Thanks everybody for coming. Is BG anybody else from BGC gonna come to a goodbye?
That's me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So, can y'all not hear me or see me?
We can't
Okay.
see you.
Can't see you, but
We can hear you.
That's weird. My camera says that it's on, and I can see myself.
Is your lens covered?
Nope. Oh well.
Okay.
We'll figure that out later. So I just wanted to say thank you to the panelists and to the audience for joining us today. We are remember these panels are recorded, so if you miss anything or want to come back in the future, you'll be able to find all the panels from Kuumba Kickback on the Black Girls Create YouTube channel. Our next panel, Things We Imagine Live, featuring me with my camera hopefully working, will happen in around 10 to 15 minutes, which should give you time for a bio break and chat with friends with Discord or check out our virtual artist alleys. And I believe that Amanda in the group here can tell you where you can all find each of them before we head off.
We already did that.
Okay, all right.
We're done. We're done.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.